Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. On this episode, I had a phone conversation with Asia McClain Chapman, although you likely know her as Asia McClain if you, along with the millions and millions of other people, listen to Serial podcasts for Season. On the first season of Serial, which was hosted by Sarah Koenig, I can't say her name. Koenig, there it is. She dug into the trial of Adnan Syed, who was accused and found guilty of murdering his girlfriend, Hae Min Lee. Now, Hae Min Lee vanished on January 13th, 1999. Her body was found weeks later in Leakin Park, which is in Baltimore, Maryland. And he was the prime suspect, and Adnan was the prime suspect. The trial happened, and he was found guilty. However, there was a person who said, hey, I saw him in the library at the time this was committed. This crime was supposedly committed. And that person was Asia McClain. Although her testimony was not heard, she wrote letters to Adnan and said, hey, I saw you in the library. And the prosecution and the defense, they did not follow through. And so her testimony was not heard. Adnan was found guilty and sentenced to prison, where he still is, by the way. Here's the thing. In our country, we have this right to a fair trial. And if you, regardless of whether you think he's innocent or guilty, if you listen to all of the evidence that Sarah dug up and all the people she talked to and this, that, and the other, it's pretty evident that he did not get a fair trial. If he didn't get a fair trial, then how do you find someone guilty? I mean, I know it happens all the time, and there's all sorts of things that play into that. But in my opinion, whether or not he's guilty or innocent, which I've gone back and forth myself trying to figure it out, he certainly didn't have a fair trial. And so that being said, with this Serial podcast coming out, and of course everyone has their opinions and all that, but when the information came out and it was so obvious that the trial was so poorly handled that he didn't have proper defense, then people dug in and along with the Innocence Project, basically they're gonna retry it. So there is a appeal going on. I think there's an appeal going on for the appeal. It's starting to get real convoluted again. From my understanding, the prosecution is trying to stop the retrial, and I don't really know where it is at this very second as I'm recording this. I spoke with Asia a couple months back, and gosh, yeah, I'd say it's been about 2 months now, maybe even more. And she was great. It was very kind of her to be so open and forthright in the conversation. And she wrote a book about being the alibi witness, which must have been incredibly surreal. And of course, everybody in the world looked to her. And she wrote this book called Confessions of a Serial Alibi, which is out now on Amazon. And I put links to it on HeyHumanPodcast.com, along with other information about the trial and Adnan, and as well about Hae. It's certainly a tragedy, as it always is when somebody dies, when somebody is murdered, especially a young person. I mean, it's always bad, right? But a young person, most especially. This case is just, it's a bunch of mazes and rabbit holes and confusion, and who knows? I guess Adnan knows if he did it or not. Maybe he's the only one that will ever know. So that being said, Asia and I had this conversation. We did a conference call, and there's a couple of times where because we were on the phone, unfortunately you can hear my call waiting or my text come through. I tried to get those out of there, but I apologize ahead of time for the annoying beeps that happened a couple times in this conversation. Usual stuff, you know how to find me on social media, Hey Human Podcast. On Twitter, it's under Susan Ruthism. Thank you guys for getting the word out and for sharing everything. If you have a moment, please go to iTunes and rate and review Hey Human. And other than that, thanks for listening. Thanks for helping grow this thing. And I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. So enough of that. As usual, I am going on and on. So let's just get to it. Here we go.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi. Hi, Susan. This is Asia.
Hi, Asia. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for being on Hey Human. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry that our schedules got so wonky.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been dealing with some health issues lately, so my brain is out in left field half of the time, and I'm so sorry about
no.
yesterday.
It's all fine. Don't even worry about it. And you're a mom, so you get all the passes in the world. Because being a mom's got, that's just...
I woke up yesterday, and the kids had taken my phone, and it was like completely dead, and I just said, I'll put it on the charger, and my husband's like, let's go outside, we got to weed the garden, and so we got out there, and we started doing all that, and swimming with the kids, and
life takes precedent, I think, gets away from us, for sure. Well, so I want to tell everyone, so your name is obviously Asia McClain Chapman. You are now married, so Chapman is your married name, but back in the day, your maiden name being McClain, and everybody, I'm sure, who like the whole world knows you from Serial Podcast.
Yeah.
Whether, much to your chagrin in some ways, I suppose. But
it definitely takes some getting used to. Even now, I still get caught off guard.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting that after so much time and all the renewed interest, I imagine you get harangued a bit online, and when you're out and about, people recognize you and stuff.
Well, it's more so in conversation. People don't necessarily visually recognize me, but in conversation when things come up, people begin to put two and two together, especially, with me living out in Eastern Washington, the minute they put together Asia and then they find out I'm from Baltimore, a lot of times that's kind of what clues people in, and then they're like, wait a minute.
Right. Yeah, Washington's my home state.
It is?
Yeah, I live in Nashville, but Washington State is where I grew up.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Is it? Are you guys getting smoked out from Canada, from the fires?
We are. And there were actually some fires a little bit more local as well, so it's been gross. Our sun was pink the night before last because of all the smoke in the air. Not our sun, I'm sorry, our moon was pink. It reminded me of sunset in LA with all the smog,
Oh, yeah. I'm sure it's beautiful, but not very healthy to breathe by any means.
No, not at all. We were barbecuing yesterday, and I swear while I was outside that I smelled just like barbecue because there's so much, smoke in the air.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My parents, they live in Seattle, and my mom, because we're on a phone, some of the text stuff's going to come through, unfortunately. Normally we do like Skype and stuff, and that won't happen, but so just so people listening, when you hear the beep beep, that's my phone getting texts. Anyway, so my parents were saying, my mom's got some asthma stuff, and she was saying it was really hard to breathe. But, So let's talk about the book. So you wrote a book, Confessions of a Serial Alibi, and in it you're talking about just from your perspective, your point of view, because you had a lot of people really coming at you saying that your memory was not a real memory, or that you were trying to support Adnan because you had a crush, all these different theories and stuff. And
yeah,
so you wrote
I've heard every everything under the sun.
Yeah.
Everything from, is she remembering the wrong day? Is she lying because she has a crush on him? As if, that would last, something like that would last the duration of almost 20 years.
Right. And a marriage and children.
Conspiracy theories about working with other individuals in the case, as far as family members or family friends. Just crazy. I've even heard, I've even seen a rumor where they speculate that I was helping Adnan in order to impress my ex-boyfriend, who was Adnan's friend.
Wow, that starts getting very woven together, doesn't it?
Exactly. And, as you can imagine, some of them are laughable. But, when people start to insult your character and, just pick different aspects of your person and your persona apart, it becomes hurtful as well. And, as a normal, everyday citizen, I was not accustomed to that type of attention or scrutiny, and it just became very stressful for me. And so I actually began writing in a journal, just to try to vent some of my frustration and work through it myself. But after a while, it just became apparent to me that, it wasn't really giving me the help that I needed, because, I wasn't really voicing those opinions to anyone. I wasn't getting the opportunity to get my side of things out there. And, after I ended up testifying, I was connected with several different people that, made this opportunity apparent for me. And it was just something that came together really, really oddly, actually. And so it gave me an opportunity to get my voice out there so that people could actually have a firsthand account of, what this whole situation has been like for me and what my memory actually is.
Right. I think it's interesting, too, just after hearing the whole episodal podcast, getting through the whole thing, reading your book, doing some of the research online, and I think a lot of people who are the armchair detectives on this, listening at home and such, they're coming at their theories from the minds of, 30-year-olds, even 20-year-olds, 50-year-olds, whatever. And I think people forget what it's like to be a 17-year-old kid in high school.
Actually, yeah, I totally agree. And to take it one step further, not only do they forget that these are 16 and 17 and 18-year-old kids that were going through this, they forget that this was back in 1999.
All right.
And kids have changed tremendously.
Yeah.
In between then and now. And so, not to say that we were more innocent, but there were in a way we were, because technology was so different, television was so different, morality was so different.
Yeah.
And so it just completely catches me off guard at times when I hear some of these conspiracy theories, because it's like, what planet are you guys from?
Well, yeah, for the prosecution, I imagine talking to the jury or to the judge or whatever, that to get the prosecution's point across, they have to use modern day conversation and hope that people don't really remember what it was like in 1999.
Yeah.
I think it was a more innocent time. I absolutely agree with that. And of course, I think back, I'm like, okay, what are some of the moments in my high school career that I really recall, first of all, and, especially centered around a guy, for example. And, I remember some things, but certainly not all the details. Like, I remember, okay, yeah, I saw you in silk screening class on, this one particular day, and it was nice out, but your memory is revolving around the fact that you were pissed off at a boyfriend, and and so those are things that really stick in a person's mind, I feel like.
Exactly, especially when you consider, my boyfriend Derek at the time, him picking me up from that library was not an everyday occurrence. Traditionally, I would usually walk out to one of the student parking lots and have him pick me up, and it just so happened that I knew he was going to be a while, not as late as what he was, but I knew he was going to be a while, and so I decided to have him pick me up at the library, seeing as though it was a public library, and it was still on school grounds, so it wasn't, very far for me to have to walk. And it just so happened that that was the location that I picked that day. But that wasn't something that happened every day. So,
right. Yeah, it's so. Do you feel like just every day that goes by? Does this stuff come up to you every day, or are you able to have a regular life? Or is this something that's always looming over you since January, 1999?
I don't know. The best answer I could give you is yes and no.
Yeah.
I am on social media. I am on Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm quite addicted to it, I will admit. I just like the fast pace of the news and the information that you get. I used to watch a lot of news, and now not so much, because you can get the same news a lot more direct and a lot faster on Twitter. But in general, I think in the last couple years I've learned to separate the two, so that the case doesn't consume my life like it used to.
Yeah.
So on a daily basis, this case, Adnan, is something that's always on my mind, because it's not settled. It's still not done. So until we get some sort of finality to it, it's always going to be in the back of my mind. But on an everyday basis, I'm raising 3 boys, 6, 4, and 13 months. So I don't have the luxury of sitting around thinking about every detail every day. I have a life.
Sure.
And I've learned to put it on the back burner when it needs to be, and then when something happens or we have new information, of course it tends to consume that day or those couple days, and then it goes back to the back burner so I can function with my life.
Right. Do you have a theory as to why you weren't called originally to testify way back after you wrote the letters and said, "Hey man, I saw you in the library, tell somebody," and Adnan said to his defense, "Hey, there is a witness," and the fact that you weren't called, that just is so weird to me.
Yeah, it's crazy. No, I don't have a theory. I always just assumed that it was inconsequential, like if how many times are you out and about and you run into someone or a friend of a friend at the grocery store or at Starbucks, and you have, a conversation with them, and you just go on about your life. If something were to happen and you said, "Hey, I remember seeing that person that day and I talked to them," and you mention that to their family or whomever, and no one ever reaches out to you, you just assume that was just some random thing. You happened to see that person on the same day that this crazy thing happened.
Well, I think too, when you're a teenager, if you're a teenager and you say, "Hey, I saw this person," and then no adult follows up with you, I think the teenager mind would be like, "Oh, well, it's not like a 17-year-old. Yeah, and a 17-year-old doesn't know." Maybe now in the advent of the internet and all that, but I would venture to say most teenagers, unless they really paid attention in 9th grade civics class, they would not really understand the follow-through mechanism.
Exactly, and to me, that was two motivations for writing to Adnan. The first was to let him know that I had told his family the information, that I had given to them in the event that they didn't think it was important, and maybe it was important. Maybe he would know better, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote to him to say, hey, I went to your family's house. I remember seeing you. This is what I told your family. I remember seeing you. Hope everything's, going well, considering, you're in jail. And just thought I'd put that out there in case, anybody needs to contact me. And the other reason for writing was just pure, curiosity, wanting to know what was going on. Everybody had all these rumors swirling around our environment, and no one really knew what to think. You had some people who figured he was guilty because he was remaining in custody. You had people who thought he was not guilty. You had people who didn't know either way, but, went every which way based on whatever rumor they heard. And so I wanted to know what was going on. And I've always been the type of person that you need to get your information from the horse's mouth. And so, in the process of writing the letters, when you read them online, you can see that there's a lot of curiosity there. There's a lot of questions that are being asked because, I want to know what's going on, what am I potentially being involved in? And here, by the way, I told your family that this is what happened, and I'm telling you in the event that they forget,
How did the rumor mill of high school react to your letters at first? I mean, because I imagine that became part of the rumor mill as well, is that,
No one, these letters weren't even a thing until here recently, till Serial. These were, I assume these were private letters.
I see. Okay.
I mailed them. I don't even recall if I ever told anyone that I wrote to him.
Did you tell people that you saw him in the library? I mean, with all this, I know there was a time frame between her disappearance, between when Hae disappeared and when they found her body. That there was, a month went by or something? A few weeks went by?
I believe it was 8. I think it was 8 weeks.
8 weeks. So in that time, though, were you like, wow, this is crazy. I swear I saw him in the library. Did people believe you, or was it just that high school thing where some people...
It was part of a larger conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I know I told one of my teachers. I know I told my ex-boyfriend because he was in a class with me, a class that I had with that same teacher. And so I'm sure it was part of a group discussion, but I don't recall exactly who I told that to. But I can imagine how I would say that.
Sure.
And it wouldn't be anything that would be cause for alarm because, again, even years afterwards, and by this time, assuming that he was guilty, even years later, I would say things to people like, yeah, I saw this guy from high school the same day he went and killed somebody, and it's just like, and I can't give you an example right now of the kind of conversation at which that would come up, but, it's never been anything that's like, oh, stop the presses. It's just kind of been just one of those crazy life things that tend to come up in conversation, like, what's the craziest thing that ever happened to you in high school? Oh, well, one time I had a conversation with this guy, and he ended up, doing this.
Yeah, I'm sure if that competition is ever happening at a party, you're going to win hands down every time. For sure.
And the crazy thing is, with my ex-boyfriend and his friends, I think that the primary reason why they don't remember is because they don't remember Adnan, because they didn't know him. They didn't go to our school. But I think that the the other reason is because when I talked to them about it, at the time, I thought he had been rightfully convicted. So I told them, hey, you remember that guy that was in the library that day that you picked me up? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, he ended up killing his girlfriend. Crazy, right? But I never reiterated that they believed that all happened the same day, because I don't even think back then that I knew that to even be the case.
You mean because you didn't know if he was being convicted yet, or just because you didn't think that, was it Derek would remember, or?
Well, I didn't think that, I didn't think to tell them that it happened that day, because I didn't know that at the time. I never followed the case.
Did they?
So I didn't know what the state's argument ever was until,
yeah.
Until I listened to Serial, really.
Well,
I got some case information from Kevin Urick in 2010, but I don't think it was until I heard Serial that I knew, or that I learned that he was suspected of killing her that same day. I mean,
right.
At the time, the issue was we're trying to put together the pieces of his day, and but just as a kid, it just never, I never thought about it that way.
Well, I think too. I mean, so Adnan was a friend of yours, right? You were not in each other's circles. You were more peripheral circle. They were.
Yeah. Well, a lot of I guess it's kind of strange, but I actually have a group of best friends that I've had, say about 3 of them from elementary school and 4 of them starting in middle school through high school and college, and we're all still friends now. And a lot of those people were in the magnet program. I was not. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those people I also played sports with. So a lot of them were, had classes with Adnan. Some of them played football with Adnan. And my ex lived in a close neighbor, in the same neighborhood. And they were friends. And after me and my ex broke up, we remained friends. We're still friends to this day. And so I never had an opportunity to hang out with Adnan and get to know him on a personal basis, the same as Hae. But because we were all athletes, we were all friends, we were all well-known people in school, so I knew of him.
Right.
And at the time I would have considered him a friend, but I didn't have a personal relationship with him.
But your ex-boyfriend,
or Hae, for that matter.
Your ex-boyfriend lived in the neighborhood. Who your ex-boyfriend now? He was current boyfriend then when you were a kid, but they lived in the same central area.
No. There's 2 exes in the story, so a lot of people get that confused. So at the time when Hae went missing, I had a ex-boyfriend who was Adnan's friend, and then I had a boyfriend,
Derek,
who is now an ex as well.
And that's Derek, right? The one that you were that you were going out with when Hae disappeared.
That was Derek. I'm talking about Justin.
Okay, so
he actually testified at the last post-conviction hearing as well. So.
Oh, okay. Did he? Oh, okay, cool.
I take that back. I think he was going to testify, but they decided not to use him. I remember seeing him at court, so
okay.
I think they ended up. I wasn't allowed in the courtroom until afterwards, so
right. They didn't want.
I think they ended up not using his testimony.
Yeah, they sequester the witnesses so that they can't hear each other's stories to change their own. I think is why they do that. I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah. So, well, I heard that, and in an attempt to keep certain individuals out of the courtroom as well.
Yeah. So Derek came to pick you up, and in your book you said he came into the library to get you and was kind of ticked off that you were talking to another guy, but he doesn't.
Yeah, him him and Gerard both came into the library, and
Why were they not considered to be witnesses then? They just, their memory of it wasn't strong enough?
Well, I believe by the time Rabia came to talk to me, Adnan had already been convicted.
Right.
And I told her about speaking to them, but to be frank with you, Derek was not the most well-behaved teenager. He also got in trouble with the law. And so at the time I told her, that he remembered seeing him, because remember how I said when I told them, hey, you remember that guy that was in the library that day you picked me up?
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up getting arrested for killing his girlfriend. So, based on that conversation, I told Rabia, yeah, they remember seeing him in the library. But I said, they don't really like court and cops and all that, so, let me know if you need them or if you want to talk to them later. But, offhand, they're going to be like,
yeah, then
I don't know if I want to get involved,
Well, if they get subpoenaed, though, they have to get involved. That's the thing. I wonder if that will come to that.
But, at 16 and at 17 years old, I'm not thinking, let's get a subpoena. If I could go back,
right.
I would have said, let's go to their house right now and get an affidavit signed, and knowing what I know now.
Well, yeah, it would have made your life a lot easier, because then you wouldn't have been the sole person that it hinges upon.
Exactly. Then I would have two other people with affidavits saying that, they remember seeing him. But, such is life. You only get one time to do things, and...
Well, you mentioned too
that hindsight is 20/20. So.
Well, of course, you mentioned too that, and it got me thinking. That you said, "Oh, well, you kind of was like, you didn't even say, oh, you remember that guy that I saw in the library? Oh, he got arrested for, possibly murdering his girlfriend." And it reminded me of when I was in high school. I think sophomore or junior, there were a couple arrests in our high school. One kid had broken into, he was stalking one of the school people, one of the kids, and ended up breaking into her place and doing some stuff. And he got arrested, and then another kid got arrested for something else. And it was just stuff you heard in the halls. If you weren't in their actual circle, and the stories, of course, got blown out of, into these huge, tall tales, And,
it was a topic of conversation,
But nobody, if they weren't in your circle, you didn't really pay attention, because you're 16 and you're, self-absorbed, and, all you care about is...
And exactly, and, like I said, when I told them about that day, it was just kind of like, check this crazy thing out, right? You remember that guy that I was talking to when you picked me up? Well, guess what happened to him, kind of thing,
Yeah. Then it was... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say...
I was going to say, and then the conversation was over as quickly as it began, it just wasn't...
Sure. Have you done any, memory recovery stuff at all, with any kind of psychiatric hypnotherapy or anything like that?
I worked with my pastor on some things, not concerning this case. I have some memory loss from my childhood that I, was working on for a while. I've never tried anything with Adnan. I don't know, it kind of, my previous experience with it kind of just was very uncomfortable for me. And I don't know if that's something that I will even want to do, because of course it wouldn't be admissible, in court.
Yeah, I don't know if it is. I mean, I just don't know enough about that kind of thing. I just was curious if, I know that some people say that hypnotherapy isn't valid because, it can create false memories. And you talk a little bit about false memories in your book.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's tricky. The whole thing is just so tricky. It's this
Yeah, and
high wire.
some things you just don't want to tamper with, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember what I remember, and that's what I stick to, and that's, you know, that's what the only thing that I offer out of this whole thing is the truth. The truth about what I experienced and what I remember. And I don't want to get into gray area where I start trying to remember some things that may or may not be true. You know, I would prefer to just keep it real and keep it where it is and keep it authentic, you know?
Yeah. Now, I'm not asking you to answer this in a specific way, but more in theoretical. Have you pulled it apart, all the stuff that you know, especially now that Serial is out, and have your own theories, or do you just leave it well enough alone and don't even go there?
Well, I mean, as you can imagine, it's been, like 18 years since we lost Hae, and you know, over that 18 years, I've gone back and forth on both sides of the aisle more than probably anyone outside of family members of the people involved.
Right.
And one of the things that I had to learn to do in the last couple of years is to just leave it alone, because you start questioning things, you start getting emotional, you know, and I would have nights where I wasn't sleeping well, or I would be crying, or, you know, because one moment I would be wondering if I was helping someone that was guilty and if Hae would be upset with me. And the next minute, you know, I would be worried that, you know, she would possibly be upset with me if I didn't come, you know, forward with the information that I knew, because perhaps her killer is still out there. So, I mean, you know, for me, I just had to learn to just try not to worry about it, because, you know, ultimately it's going to be up to the courts, and ultimately we'll never really know the truth, and there's nothing that I can do about it. So I'm not going to sit here and run myself into the nut house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Being over, you know, overthinking it.
Yeah.
I just had to stop doing that.
You said you talked about having a apparition or maybe a dream of Hae. Do you feel like she was trying to tell you something?
I'll be honest, at the time, I didn't know what the hell was going on. It's not every day or every night, as it were, that you experience something like that.
Yeah. Can you talk about it a little bit?
Soon after, you know, I became aware of sleep paralysis, and that can be stress-induced. It could be due to a lack of sleep, and at the time I was so stressed that I wasn't sleeping well. I actually suffer from insomnia. That's it's a side effect of one of the health issues that I've been actually suffering with even right now. And, you know, sleep paralysis can be brought on by both of those, stress and lack of sleep. But, I mean, in a nutshell, it was a situation where I went to sleep, and how do you describe it? When you have sleep paralysis, it's exactly what it sounds like. You go to lay down to go to bed, and you seemingly fall asleep, but you're kind of halfway in between that sleep and awake state, and so it can cause you to have hallucinations. It sounds kind of funny, but they think that a lot of people who believe they've been abducted by aliens have actually just experienced sleep paralysis. You know, but I am also a spiritual person, so I don't necessarily believe in ghosts, but, you know, I've never seen a ghost, so who knows? I just try to deal with what I know, and I know I've never seen a ghost in real life.
Well, what does your gut tell you? Do you think it was just the stress, or do you think you were getting a message?
At the time, I took it as a sign that I needed to stay strong and not back down.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it was a sign or if it was just my gut manifesting itself to reassure me that I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Because as you can imagine, when Serial came out, it was like someone dropped a bomb in my lap. And, doing the right thing sounds so easy in principle, but putting your life on the line as far as your reputation, your namesake, and just putting the time and the effort into being involved with something so viral and so popular, it's stressful. And you don't know what you're getting into. All you know is that it's complete chaos,
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I had reporters, leaving notes on my door. All kinds of crazy things have happened, in addition to just irrational fears that I had, about people randomly, because I did have people randomly showing up at my house. I was, worried people would show up at my house with cameras, and, I had small children, and it was, you just don't know, and people are so nutty these days.
Yeah.
All it takes is one crazy person to, show up at your church or something and throw acid in your face. I mean, you just never know.
Right. And you felt, from what I understand, you felt betrayed by Sarah when she sort of ambushed you in her own way.
I mean,
in the bening, I don't know that you would feel that way now.
Well, she didn't really have a choice. I mean, how do you approach someone with something like that?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's always going to be an ambush.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And that was one of the things that I heard when I finally met Justin Brown about them sending an investigator out to my home. I told him that it freaked me out. When I finally got to meet him, and he said, he says, I'm really sorry, but we didn't know what else to do. You were all the way across the country, and we didn't know, how not to freak you out. Someone shows up at your doorstep, 10 and 14 years after the fact. It's going to freak you out no matter what.
Well, especially they show up at 10 o'clock at night. That's not really appropriate. And, there is this thing called the Postal Service that I would imagine that they could maybe reached out that way. And I don't mean to be disparaging.
Well, they had to find me first.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the issues that they had was I was never served a subpoena because they didn't know for sure that I lived there because they met with my husband, and at the time he just pretended to be a friend of mine and said that he could get a message to me. And then we ended up moving. We ended up moving to Spokane probably about 4 months after that happened, or was it 4 months? No, I'm thinking about something else. We ended up moving to Spokane in October of that year, and this was, I believe, in the spring. So, who knows what happened? But had I been served a subpoena, obviously I would have went. But because the person never established that I was physically present at that residence, I don't think they ever tried to even serve me a subpoena, or maybe they tried after we moved or something like that.
Yeah. All of this is just so fascinating. The fact that in a modern world, Sarah can dig in and get information and overturn a conviction, really. That's phenomenal. And it's funny, I've asked a lot of my friends, because everyone's listened to Serial, and I've said, okay, so what do you think? Is he guilty or innocent? And it's really split down the middle. And
it's very polarizing.
It really is. It's fascinating. And, people are like, well, why didn't he call her looking for her when she was missing if, he loved her and respected her and all this stuff? Or why, and I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. Why does Jay's story change? I don't know. Why does...
The funny thing to me is when people that know me want to talk about the case to me, and they know me, so they know, I'm not a liar. They know I'm telling the truth. And they go, and I know you said you saw him there, but this doesn't make sense. Or, or they're, for Adnan, and they're telling me how, why they think that he's innocent. Oh, on top of the fact that you saw him there, so it's weird when people talk to me about it because, no one who knows me ever questions my role, but they question everything else about it.
Yeah, and I don't know that people really understand that the point of the defense is to get a client off. The point of the prosecution is to put the accused away. And
exactly.
They're manipulating the story as much as anything else. They're weaving a tale. That's whether or not
a narrative.
They're weaving a narrative. Whether or not the person is guilty or innocent, the presumption of our court system is that they are innocent until proven guilty. And with the information that was given, from what I understood, and again, I'm an armchair person too, it just didn't seem like enough to put somebody without a shadow of a doubt away for murder. It's just so bizarre. I mean, the whole thing is intriguing as all get out, It
is very bizarre. I think, I don't know where I heard this or read this, but someone, I think it might have been in Serial, when someone said questions, how unlucky does a person have to be?
Yeah.
In order to be found guilty of a murder in the way that Adnan was found guilty. And that is like, that's kind of like one of the reasons why I wanted to get the story out.
Yeah.
Was because I knew that there was a lot of misinformation. Even small things that seem unimportant that matter when it comes to putting the whole all of the events together. And that's one of the things that I find most interesting about this situation is because if you do not have all of the pieces, which most people don't, I don't even understand how anyone could be 100% one way or the other.
Right.
Because I have, information based upon my personal experiences with various people that I know for me changes how I feel about certain aspects of this case, because I know the truth behind certain situations.
Right.
And so it's just kind of weird to me because this case is just so multifaceted with information. And a lot of things, they got dropped in the cracks. And it was like, no, this matters, And I wanted to put my portion of it out there as best as possible. Because I felt like I had minute details that made a difference.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you have not had any interaction with him at all, right? I mean, I assume you can get correspondence in prison, but you...
I haven't seen it on since that day in the library, to my knowledge. I mean, perhaps in passing in a few days before his arrest in the hallway, things like that, but, no, I haven't seen him since high school. I haven't talked to him since high school. People often ask me, have I talked to him? Do I want to talk to him? And
yeah.
It's like part of me wants to and part of me doesn't,
I understand when you said you'd want to just look him in the eye and... I mean, I don't.
Well, yeah, I mean, part of me wants to say, tell me the truth, what happened? What do you know? But that's not really, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not really realistic,
Yeah. Man, oh man. I mean, it's just the whole thing of it is so fascinating, and it's a page turner for sure. Because I mean, and then listening to Serial, Sarah interviewed somebody from Adnan's mosque who said, "Oh, well, he stole money out of the donations plate, so he must be a murderer." And I thought, okay, wait a minute, man. When I was 17 or 16, if I had been in charge of that, I totally would have pilfered $20 to go buy movies or you're a teenager. I think more kids would do that wouldn't, and it doesn't make us killers. It's just again,
or something of equivalent.
Yeah,
of the equivalent.
And everyone has their own story too. Were there people who were jealous of the fact that he was a popular kid? Even adults can be jealous of children, and like those girls that harassed you online that were trying to call you out. But see, what does that do? Is that makes they get their moment of fame if that goes viral.
I don't know what that was about. That is just a weird situation all to itself, because when I was in high school, I wasn't really good friends with these girls, but I was friendly towards them, and I never had any issues with them. And even in our day and age of Facebook, I like to say I was one of the first people on Facebook because I used to do the whole MySpace thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've lived away from Baltimore since, 2000? And so I've had to find alternative means of staying connected with people. So the internet has always been a thing of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I did the Facebook thing, and before that, there was email, and so I've always found a way to stay connected with people, and I've been Facebook friends with both of them for years. We've shared photos of our families and our children. One of them was a stay-at-home mom, and so there was that virtual connection, and so the whole situation just completely came out of left field for me, and I'm left with the only thought being that it was an attention grab of some sort, because I honestly have no other explanation for it.
Yeah. So tell people that are listening that don't know, these two women, the sisters, they harassed you, but it was a more recent situation, right? This wasn't.
Well, I wouldn't really say it was harassment. When I was writing my memoir, to give you guys a little context, after testifying, like I said, I was put into contact with several people, and one of which was a publisher at Post Hill Press, and they wanted to work with me, and I told them that I had been, writing some things in a journal, and that, it had been recommended to me that I should try to formulate this. And so they talked to me, and I shared with them some of the things that I've been writing, and they said, "Great, okay, we want to do this project. Let's get it done. There's summer's coming. Making of a Murderer is coming out with a book in September. We found out that this other person is writing a book about true crime, and so we want this book out for the summer. Can you get it done in 3 months, because it takes us 3 months to get it on the shelves?"
Yeah.
And so, of course, I'm like, I can try. And so I had to take the little bit of content that I had in my journals, and I had to turn it into what is on Amazon right now. And I had probably about 2.5, 3 months to do that. So there were a lot of holes for me because it wasn't a full story yet. It was basically rants, it was opinions, it was emotional content, but it was not put out. It wasn't put into a timeline yet. So everything was everywhere, if you can imagine, and there were things that were missing. That I wanted to explain and dive into a little bit deeper. And so I started, I keep everything, all my mementos from high school in a box, and every time this case comes forward, even back when the private investigator showed up at my home, I ended up diving into the high school box, looking at high school photos all over again, going through my yearbook all over again. And during this time when I was going through the book, I found the picture of these two sisters, and I remembered that it was from our cooperative education class, and we had to check in. It wasn't really a class, but we had to check in at a particular classroom with a particular teacher before we could leave for the day. And sometimes they would make us wait because it was in between it was in between schedule for some other students, and they didn't want us commingling in the hallway. As we were leaving campus, they didn't want us commingling with the other students. And so sometimes they would make us wait, 10, 15 minutes for the bell change for them, other students to get into the cafeteria before they would let us leave the classroom.
Right.
And so I found this picture of them, and I was pretty sure that it was co-op class because I didn't, there were some other people in this photo that, I never had classes with. And so being that we were Facebook friends, I sent it to the one sister who was the stay-at-home mom, and I sent it to both of them, and I said, do you remember what class this photo of you guys is taken in, and who is this in the photo? Because there was only one, and they're identical twins, and there's only one of them in the photo. And I couldn't get a straight answer. But, it's 17 years later, so it's like, okay, I get it. If you don't know, I thought I knew what. I still think I know to this day which one it is because I'm pretty good when it comes to telling my identical twin friends apart. I've had many sets of friends. And so I had an idea who it was, and I had an idea what class it was, but I was looking for confirmation because I was going to reference that in the book. And so I couldn't get a straight answer from either one of them about, what class they thought it was, which one of them they thought was in the photo. And so I was like, hey, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. And then, many, many, many months later, after we go to court and Adnan is granted a retrial, I get a nasty email from one of the sisters saying that I'm a liar and I'm trying to, make money or what have you, and, just completely attacking me out of left field about my involvement in this case. So if you can imagine, it's just complete out of the blue. So this is how crazy that part of my life had been when the case was, going to court and going through all of that. I assumed that, someone had perhaps who was a fan of the case had got a hold of their Facebook account.
Oh, yeah.
And was using their account to send me some kind of crazy message, because people's Facebook accounts get hacked all the time.
Sure.
And so I was like, okay, this is really bizarre. I showed my husband. He's like, that's really strange. So I sent a message to the other sister saying, hey, is your sister's account, did her account get hacked? Because I'm getting this really crazy message, and it doesn't sound like something she would say, or like, it doesn't sound like her, the person that I've spoken with on Facebook throughout these last few years. And her sister goes off on me. Her sister's like, no, she didn't get hacked. You are a liar. And she's like, I remember fighting with you, and you said that you were going to lie for him, and just crazy. So I'm like, okay, what the hell?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, this is crazy. So I show my husband again, and he's like, this is crazy. And
did this happen
right
Did this happen right after Serial came out? So they heard your
Yeah, this happened after we went to court. So I talked to them right after. Actually, was it right after? When I first talked to them, it wasn't like Serial had been out. And the crazy thing is, when Serial came out, I didn't even know about Serial. I had people contacting me via text message and Facebook telling me that I was on the radio. And one of these sisters is one of the people who reached out to me and said, hey, have you heard this? This is on the internet.
So she reached out to you and said, hey, you're on here and you're saying that you saw him in the library, but she doesn't attack you then. She waits until the book.
Exactly.
Well, that's weird.
Exactly. She waited until, 18 months later?
Yeah, that's
almost 2 years later.
Certainly suspect.
To have this memory and, it's just, so the whole thing is just completely bizarre.
Yeah.
And that's why I said I'm left only thinking that this was like some misguided attempt to get some attention, because otherwise I have no explanation for it, unless perhaps they had an argument with someone else and they're, conflating the two situations and thinking that it was me and it wasn't me. I have no idea.
Right.
And so it's just, the whole situation is just so odd. It gets under my skin because it just doesn't make any sense,
Well, yeah, and your character's being attacked, which I imagine it doesn't feel very good either.
Exactly. I mean, that's given.
Yeah.
But the sad thing is I'm so used to that being attacked that's not even what bothers me about it. It's the fact that I had, for all intents and purposes, I had a friendship.
Yeah.
Because we had these virtual relationships with people, and and we become friendly with them on a virtual level. And these were people whose photos I enjoyed, and people who I enjoyed checking in on from time to time, and seeing their kids grow up, on Facebook, and, oh, she's walking now, and, that kind of thing. And so it's just, that's what bothers me is honestly that, the idea that someone who I thought was, somewhat friendly with me would do something like that just to try to get some fame or attention. That's what's disturbing to me.
Yeah, human nature is tricky, though. I mean, I've had, especially, I don't know, maybe this is a sexist thing to say, but I've had female relationships in my 20s and stuff where a girlfriend will suddenly get bully energy, for lack of a better word, and just start attacking. It's sort of like a survival of the fittest. If they feel that one person in the group is the alpha, but
even in those situations, it's usually someone that you're having, a personal relationship. You're interacting with them, physically. These are people that you go to dinner with, or people, not.
Sure, but to be devil's
friend that you haven't seen in 20 years.
But see, that's, to me, that makes even more sense, because they don't have an emotional attachment to someone. They can say, "Oh, let's weave this tale. If we can get our own book out of it, it's her. There's not that emotional connection. I don't know. I mean, that's all hearsay, of course, and conjecture, but it's just something to think about. I think, it's very easy to throw.
It's possible, but it's I don't know. I don't think like that. So, when people do things like that, I can imagine it. I can see how, but I have issues processing that kind of nature, because I'm not like that.
I understand. I must be partially devious, so. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. I could totally see people doing that. And I just think that it's interesting to me. I think this happens constantly, that there are folks with hands full of stones willing to toss them left and right, because if they throw the stones first, maybe nobody will look at them, So, what happens next for you? What's in regards to all of this? What happens next, or do you even know?
I have no clue.
Will you be called for?
Seriously.
I mean, is it getting what? Do you get?
I have no clue. I have Google alerts in my emails, so there are certain keywords that I scan the internet for, and that's usually how I get the bulk of my news. That Twitter. And I'm pretty much just reacting on the fly to whatever happens. Right now, we're literally in legal purgatory, and which sucks.
Yeah.
And, because it's kind of like, you do this great thing, but I'm still human. I still want to go on with my life. I don't want to be the serial alibi, for the rest of my life. I don't want to be, I'm 36 years old. I don't want to be pushing 50 and we're still arguing this in court,
Right.
Not that it would even go that long, hopefully, but...
Well, it's stalling right now, right? There's a stall.
Yeah, well, they went back to court because the state appealed some issues after Adnan won the post-conviction hearing, and because they appealed some issues, the state cross-appealed, and so they went to court and whipped out their rulers to measure who had the biggest you-know-what, and right now we're waiting to see what the results are. And I was told that could be anywhere from 3 months to, possibly a year.
And he stays in jail, even though the convictions are returned, he has to stay incarcerated, or?
Yes, they filed for bail, and that was rejected.
Wow.
So he waits.
Huh. That's quite a story.
Yeah. So, I don't know. If the state loses, I assume we go for it with a retrial. And I don't even have an idea if I would be participating in a retrial, because who knows what would happen then. Would the state try to argue the same argument? Would they try to change the timeline?
Yeah, but
if even possible, and if they try to change the timeline, does that eliminate me? And, there's all kinds of things that could happen.
Yeah, but I thought double jeopardy meant that you wouldn't be tried again for the same crime. If it's overturned, isn't that it?
No, it's not. It's kind of weird. It's not overturned in that sense.
So it's convicted.
It would be the state saying that Christina Gutierrez was neglect in her duties, and because of the issues with the cell phone towers,
right,
that would negate that we would have to start all the way over at square one.
It doesn't make a mistrial.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, doesn't that make it a mistrial? Or no, they've figured out a loophole?
No.
Oh, wow.
Okay. It's not a mistrial. It's a do-over.
Interesting.
I don't know what the legal term for it is, but in my world, it's a do-over.
Do-over is that's a good legal term, I think. I'll accept that.
You'll accept that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So then they would go back to court, and it would be as if, and this is the crazy thing, it would be as if none of the last 17 years ever happened as far as the court is concerned.
How are
they would be trying to find jurors that have no idea about this case.
Unreal.
And they would be arguing it as if it just happened. They would have to mitigate it as if it just happened.
I mean, I can't even imagine where they would find a jury that hasn't heard of serial. It must be one of the most publicized. I mean, it's like a Lindbergh baby thing or something. I don't know.
Yeah. From someone who's personally involved, I can seriously tell you that at least 2 out of 5 people have heard serial, and 3 out of 5 know about it.
Yeah.
There's that one person that may or may not have listened to it. They've heard about it.
Right.
And they're thinking about listening to it. So,
and then it gets tried in Maryland, in Baltimore. You know, I mean, in Maryland,
in Baltimore, they would have to move it. There's no way that they could do it. And I mean, no,
it's gonna get weirder.
It would be a long shot.
This is definitely gonna get weirder before it's. You know. Yeah. Well, Asia,
I think so.
I really appreciate your time and your candor. I'll tell everybody, I'll put on HaeHumanPodcast.com, I'll put a link on Amazon to Confessions of a Serial Alibi so people know how to find your book.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
You might want to be keeping notes all along because I have a feeling there'll be another book. There's going to be a second book.
I think I'm done.
Oh, you're done?
I think I'm done.
Yeah.
If anything, I would consider... doing a second edition that may have additional stuff in it, but I don't even think I want to do that. I think I've had the lion's share of that experience, and I did what I set out to do as far as getting the bits and pieces out there and getting my perspective out there and getting my truth and out there, and if people want to know, great. I'm totally not offended if people have no interest in the book. That means it wasn't written for you. So
sure. And if people want to follow you on Twitter, how do they find you?
They can find me at Asia R. Chapman. So twitter.com/Asia R. Chapman.
Yeah, and I'll put a link to that as well. Asia, thank you so very much. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. Appreciate your kindness and your patience with me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I wish you all the success and love in the world and blessings on your family and all the good stuff.
Well, thank you. I'll take as many as I can get out of those.
Have a wonderful evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.